What have you learned that actually worked?
What works? Well, our what we do at Human Resources and like coming and poking around in your business and seeing how you're treating your people and paying your people and things like that, it's pretty personal,
Sure.
I think, and it's a little bit sensitive. And so it is a very relationship-oriented business. And so there's no form of cold calling or anything like that is going to work at all. We do try to make friends, form relationships. I think participating in some community things that are just what we care about, right, that aren't a direct connection to our business. Being involved with Mike and
Sure.
Startup Grind Seattle or the Female Founders Alliance, or sometimes we'll just sponsor a girls' coding weekend. That's been a really good way to, I think it's just letting people know who we are and what we care about, and that's probably the best success we've found.
What's the thing that you look back on and think, wow, I was much better at that than I thought I was going to be? Like, that's a surprise. It was a surprise trait to you that you just happened to figure out.
Well, I would say that I'm really pleased with the culture that we've been able to create on the team. I definitely knew what I wanted and didn't want from all the experiences that I'd had, but culture can be a really thorny thing to figure out, and we can talk about that. We see many bad things happening in company cultures right now, and I think that our culture is very simple, and it's really about kindness and high quality work and zero politics. We're a very collaborative team. People can ask for help. We treat people like grown-ups or owners. You try to hire people who are really good at what they do and just let them do it. I kind of consider that an experiment because a lot of companies don't do that. But
Sure.
in my view, it's worked extremely well.
What's Mikaela most proud of Uniquely HR? Like, what is the thing that you're like, wow, I'm really proud of X?
One thing I'm actually really proud of is that we have a lot of working moms on the team. So we have people who work part-time for us, and they do really good, hard, challenging work, and they work about 20 hours a week, and then they're free to be with their families and
Sure.
raise their kids. And I think it's cool because 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of those opportunities did not exist. I know in my career, I never had that opportunity. I was always working full-time except for the maternity leaves. And, I think it's cool. And I think my bet is a lot of those people, they just wouldn't be working if there wasn't a flexible part-time opportunity for them. So I think it's cool that they can be in the workforce and be with their families both.
Yeah. And do you think, where is HR going? Is it, and if you look ahead a few years, say 2 or 5 or maybe 10 years outwards, where's HR? Like, what's it going to be? Is it going to be all legal, or are you, sexual harassment? I mean, it's just where's it going to go?
Yeah, it's really interesting because so I was at a WTIA event yesterday. I was at Full Contact, and there was a moment when we could just ask a question or share a problem with our table mates who were from all different industries. And the question that I asked them was, I know, there was personnel, and now we think of that as like really old school.
Sure.
And now there's HR, but the kind of the new and coming thing is people ops.
Yep.
And we've talked about this on the team. So I said, what do you think of when you think of HR? And then people said, oh, it's like going to the dentist, and oh, it's like the torture chamber. And every single person at the table said that was their impression when they hear it's the terms of HR. So that's the bad stuff, And then I think there are other things that people associate with are around bureaucracy and kind of just being an arm of leadership and all of these bad things. But then I think people are starting to make better associations with what's now being called people operations, which is all the other, that and all the other good parts of
Sure.
HR, like thinking about culture, thinking about inclusion, thinking about automation. I'm personally uninformed but very interested in AI and how AI can help HR in recruiting. I've heard some really good stories around that. And then the other stuff, unfortunately, won't go away. I think complaints and I hate to say harassment and investigations, but I've worked for long enough that when there are a lot of people in a company, sometimes things happen. And I don't think you can eradicate that, but I do think a lot of the training that's happening now around unconscious bias and respectful workplaces, I hope that kind of stuff will go down so that there's a lot more room for the rest.
Yeah. And, when we talk about the workplace, and especially more of a startup environment, right, where, less than 50 people or less than 100 people, where is it today versus, say, even 10 years ago? Where do you think, how do you think the working environment has changed for those small teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are more aware that even if you're small and fun and informal, there's also a need for a certain degree of professionalism, and that work is work, right? And we can have a good time, but we also have to be respectful and productive. Not just the small companies are learning that, some big companies are figuring that out as well. I think people are seeking more help. Like when we're called in to do HR work, we're getting this question more and more that is, will your consultant also act as an employee ombudsman or an employee advocate? If our employees have a complaint, can they go to your person? Is that a confidential resource for them? And the answer is yes. I would just say I don't know in the past that would have been as important as, can you help us put some policies in place or get a handbook or whatever else is going on.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been top of mind, so to speak. Yeah, necessary. Yeah. And is there a trend? Is there any trends that, like, as business owners or starting businesses, as probably most people in this room are, like, is there any trends that, one, we should definitely be aware of, whether it be positive or negative? I
think a really big positive trend, and people probably know about this at a high level, but it's the move away from the big annual performance review that nobody ever liked anyways and wasn't that effective, but which most companies have done. So the whole time we've been in business, I think there's only one company we've helped that does an annual review. They also do quarterly check-in, but every other company is going with a quarterly check-in process. Most of them don't have ratings anymore. They're very positive and forward-looking. So that's not saying, like, don't look back and don't learn, but I think if you're sharing some of that constructive feedback and helping people course correct and learn real time, then those check-ins get to be, positive and forward-looking and asking people how they want to grow and what they want to do next. And so I love that that's become the theme. I think it's so much more fun. It's so much healthier. It's better for managers. It's better for employees. So I really like that one. I try and make it really basic for people, right? We don't expect anybody to know employment law, but it's like if you don't want this to show up, in the press or on somebody's blog, or if you don't want to say it in front of your sister, mother, significant other, grandma, whoever you respect, like, just don't do it at work. I think I actually think it's that simple.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that annoys me. Because I went to a meeting and like 3 guys lined up to talk to me when they found out I was in HR, and they all said things like, well, I would have complimented your sweater, but now I can't do that. And I would have complimented your hair, but now I can't do that either. Sure. Yeah. And I was like, I don't, first of all, I'm not here to talk about my hair and my sweater, but
I like your scarf.
Thank you. See, and it's like I'm not offended. I wasn't harassed. By the third guy in line, I started to get really annoyed, and I just said, I want to be really clear that nobody got fired for saying they liked someone's sweater. The question I have, and I know there's not an actual answer or a silver bullet, but at some size, I just fear that culture is not scalable. Like, I just have to believe that at some point you're too big. But then you have big companies, like Amazon's been really famous, regardless of whether you like their culture or not, but keeping it small, keeping the small departments, and from the beginning, Jeff had this phrase about the 2 pizza team. If you can't feed a team with 2 pizzas, the team is too big, you carve off another team. I think there's some truth in that if you're running a business that's very decentralized and you want to really empower, those decentralized teams. But keeping the culture, first of all, I think the leader they have to talk about it all the time. And I talk to leaders where they say, I am so tired of hearing myself talk about mission, vision, values. And I say, great, that means you're doing it, right? Because people don't remember, people have a lot going on. If you're growing, you have new people who haven't heard that message before. And if they don't hear it often enough, then it's not important and they're gonna forget. So I do think the leaders have to be the champions. I also think storytelling. So I have to use Amazon examples. I was there for 6 years, but this is a good one. I had a leader, and he would he would share a story about the value and, what, or leadership principles as they're called, and what that meant to him, what that looked like to him. And it was just a way to connect people to the value. And if you're doing that as often as you're talking about your customers, about your metrics, about your, financials, I think those are some of the best things that you can do. And rewarding people for behavior. We reward people for a lot of things. We don't always talk about behavior or reward people for behavior as much as we do for other kinds of measures. But I really challenge people to say the whole person comes to work. And so performance is the whole impact that that person has. It's not just because, they were a great engineer, but then they made people cry. You have to average those two things out, in my view. And I think really that's the way to uphold your values.
Yeah, that is great. Great just to end on that, right?
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it and quite enjoyed it. It's always great to chat with people I admire from afar. So thanks for being Mikaela and doing a great job.
Thanks for having me. I was very humbled to be invited, so thank you.
No worries. And